Empire. To train better, sometimes you just have to see the light.
I mean, as an athlete at this level, it's always about, milliseconds. It's about, tiny little increments that are going to make a difference between, a gold medal and a silver medal.
That's Mandy Bujold, Canadian Olympic boxer who used the new technology Blazepod to help ready herself for the Tokyo Games. This is the Future Sport Podcast. I'm Bram Weinstein. Everyone's looking for an edge, and in these modern times, a way to ensure that they stay engaged during a workout. For Mandy Bujold, it is her passion and living. But for everyone else, gamifying exercise, it's a natural extension from the daily distraction of the phone. And Blazepod thinks they have a solution to help you be your best in this Twitterized universe. Our guests this week are Michael Cummings, a trainer from Blazepod, and a Canadian pro boxer who just returned from the Olympic Games in Tokyo, Japan, Mandy Bujold. Thank you both for being with us to discuss modern training. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
For sure.
Hey, Mandy, I just want to start with you just very quickly since the Olympics just ended. It was very unusual, and it was a year later than we thought it would be. What was the experience like for you going and competing under these unusual circumstances?
Well, it was very different, that's for sure. But, I think the Canadian Olympic Committee on our end did a really good job preparing us on, what to expect. There were a lot of things that were different. And I probably feel bad for some of the athletes that will be their only Olympic experience because, I was there in 2016. I knew, what the whole Olympics was supposed to be about. So there were a lot of the fun elements of the Olympics that were taken out just to make sure people didn't gather. A lot of us didn't go to opening ceremonies, and then having no one in the stands when you're competing kind of felt like you were just in your gym training instead of actually being at the Olympics. So those things obviously, were different, but nonetheless, I think Japan as a host did a great job.
How did you handle the last year? This should have happened a year ago. How did you kind of wrap your head around COVID-19, continuing to prepare, not knowing whether the games would happen again? Can you kind of take me through that a little bit?
Yeah, it was difficult for sure. There was so much uncertainty. I think you had to keep training. You had to kind of have this hope that, our qualifiers were going to happen. And then for me, I had a whole other hurdle of, once the qualifying didn't happen, I was actually left off the list because of, the timing of a pregnancy I had in 2018.
Oh.
So I basically had to take the IOC to court, and it was not my normal preparation for any event, let alone the Olympics. There was a lot of ups and downs, a lot of uncertainty, but I guess I had a great team. I had a lot of people around me that were, continuing to motivate me every time I was in the gym. They were just kept pushing me as much as they could. And I think that's all I could really do in the circumstance.
There you go. Fighter in every sense of the word. Got it. Okay. You are here. We thank you for being here on behalf of Blazepod. So Michael, give us the background here. What is Blazepod?
Blazepod is kind of the extension of where training is going. You had back in the day very skillful athletes, and then the skilled athletes realized at some point their skill ran out and they had to just train hard. And so that's where bigger, faster, more agile came into play. And the one thing that's kind of been missing that's really pertinent now, and Mandy can attest to this, is that the brain needs to be involved. There's so many cognitive functions that our brain recognizes, like active memory, reasoning, planning, strategy. Essentially Mandy's playing chess in there. She has to know what her opponent is going to do next so that she can counter that. And so that really requires a lot of this cognitive function or cognitive agility. And essentially Blazepod are reactive agility lights, right? The light is this visual stimulus, and then you have to react to the stimulus in myriad different patterns, myriad different ways. Whether you're a court athlete, field athlete, or footwork and handwork athlete like Mandy in the combat sport world.
Could you attest to that a little bit, Mandy? How does this training help you compete?
Yeah, I mean, just like MC said, there's so many elements. I mean, reaction is definitely a big one. So when you're asking about, how did we train throughout the pandemic, that's actually when I came across Blazepod, because I was, for a while we were in lockdown. We were in lockdown for quite a while here in Ontario, and we weren't allowed to have contact. We weren't even allowed in the gym. So there was times where I was just in my garage trying to figure out, well, how do I stay active for this Olympics that might be happening or this qualifier that might be coming up, but try to keep my reflexes sharp and try to keep my mind sharp. So that's when I found Blazepod, and I thought, okay, I'm going to, use these. There's so many cool, different straps and things. You can actually put them right onto a heavy bag, so you can include it into your training. Which I found it to be very helpful because there wasn't an actual opponent in front of me. I could use these lights just to work on, okay, that would be an opening. That would be an opening, which translates really well into the ring.
Huh. You guys refer to it as flash reflex training. Can you kind of just give us a brief overview, Michael, of what that means?
Yeah, so the quickest thing in your body, right, is to have some sort of stimulus on skin or nerve or tissue or something, and then react to that, like a reflex. Doctor hits your patella and your leg kicks up. That doesn't go through the brain. That just goes through nerves, and that interaction happens. And so it's kind of a play on words. We're trying to make these athletes as fast as a reflex. And so flash reflex training, it's actually a professional education course that has been created by Blazepod that anyone can take and become kind of this certified at this way of training. You know how to use the pods, you know how to set them up, you know how to interact with different athletes in different in different genres of training. But essentially, the hope is, and I'm an ambassador for Blazepod, but the idea is that we can create more and more ambassadors, that a lot of other people can utilize this technology and this new methodology of training to make bigger, faster, stronger, athletes that also think better. In fact, just real quick, there's the study that comes off of it said there's people who do cognitive training. So, looking at something or slapping something, luminosity, that's the brain training. And then obviously the physical training that we do, those two, if you do those apart from one another, they benefit you physically, they benefit you mentally. And new research in 2018 showed that if you did both of them together, so you're, as Mandy's, boxing and moving her body, swiveling her hips, looking over her shoulder, whatever she needs to do, at the same time as receiving this visual stimulus and having to react to that, there's this, what the scientists call this super additive effect. And what I like about that is because as a strength and conditioning coach, I always want to build superhuman individuals. And so there's this super compensation additive effect that happens that up levels the athlete more so than simply training alone.
Had you done a lot of this type of training, Mandy, in the past? Maybe not specifically to the light training or the reflex training, but what we're talking about here is mental training. Had you kind of taken part in a lot of that in the past?
Actually, yeah. Again, throughout the pandemic, I started to get really creative with my training, and I actually started working with a neuroperformance coach, and she would come in, and actually only for an hour we would do neuroperformance training. So Blazepod actually became a part of that. So like MC said, sometimes she would put when you go to the doctor's office and there's a whole bunch of random numbers or alphabet that you'd have to read off. So you'd have to read off the alphabet, and then there'd be the lights on the side, and you'd have to react to the lights to see them, right, without kind of looking at them. So working on little things like that would translate again into the ring for me. So we definitely worked a lot on that, trying to be creative, trying to find new ways, because as an athlete at this level, it's always about, milliseconds. It's about, tiny little increments that are going to make a difference between, a gold medal and a silver medal. So finding those little things that will give you the edge is what's key for us.
And it also sounds like, and I don't know, I assume this applies in your sport as well. We talk about a lot of this in team sports, but finding this proverbial zone where you can lock into that, where you are as focused in on your opponent or the task at hand as possible. Is that kind of a fair representation of what you're trying to achieve here with this too?
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing too is like you want to be able to find something like when you have an opponent in front of you, right? Usually you either look them in the eyes. Some people look right here at their chest. But you want to be able to see everything at the same time, right? So I need to be able to see a left hook coming. I need to be able to see a right hand coming. But I don't necessarily want to look at that because then they might trick me and hit me with the other side, right? So you want to be able to kind of look at the person but see everything. And I think that helps.
This episode is brought to you by KPMG Risk Services. KPMG believes that when you've earned the trust of all your stakeholders, that's when your business has a solid platform to grow. That's the trust imperative. KPMG Risk Services develop and put in place dynamic risk strategies designed to help your business earn that all-important trust. Go to read.kpmg.us/trust to learn more.
All right, Michael, I want to ask you kind of just generally, the vast majority of us are not Olympians, and we're all still kind of stuck at home, and we'll see where gyms go from here. Do you see an application for what you're talking about here as home gyms and home exercise continues to be on the rise for the average athletes?
Absolutely. It's interesting because if there is, if you go and go on a jog in the morning, do your cardiovascular exercise, your heart rate gets up, maybe you start sweating 10, 15, 20 minutes into it. Maybe if you're Mandy, 30, 40, 50 minutes into it, you start sweating. But if now I ask you to react to something or race somebody, you are 100%, and this is the idea of that flash reaction. You were trying to get somewhere as quickly as possible. And so it's maximal intensity. When you look at ways of increasing those fountain of youth hormones, like that people look for to, lose weight or to become just better, like everyday athletes, you're looking for rises in testosterone and growth hormone. And it happens at maximum output. And maximum output is overloading it either with resistance or overloading it with intensity. And when you have to react to a light or something that's a stimulus, maybe at the top of your stairs, and then maybe there's one at the bottom of your stairs, you're not just going to like flow to that thing. You're not just going to nonchalantly go and tap it because it told you to get there quick. And that's the greatest thing about these light pods is that they're a trigger or they're a stimulus and you go all out immediately. And so you can decrease the amount of time that you're taking to do these things. You can set it to like 60 seconds and you're going to be gassed. So I just have a little wall and I got kids, they're shuffling back and forth, like touching up, touching down, shuffling back.
Yeah.
After 30 seconds of that. And so I think that these have amazing applicability to home training, whether you're a professional athlete or just, an everyday couch athlete.
I wonder too, and I don't want to simplify it because it probably isn't, but I do wonder because you hear so much about people having to get through the physical part of the workout. Is this on some level a distraction to help you get through the physical part of the workout?
It's your personal trainer. Like that's why Peloton's so big. That's why connected fitness is so big right now. If you and I, Bram, right now, Mandy's like, put your gloves on or just shadow box with me.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay. And she can visually see us. That's our coach. These pods can act as your coach because they're actually responsive to telling you what drill they want you to do. They set up in seconds, like even in a small room, I can set up this small course, and then there's literally countless exercises they can do. I like that you called it a distraction because a lot of PTs are doing that, where they're having someone like, in a half squat position, balance on some sort of BOSU balance trainer. And then like Mandy said, they're touching the peripherals. And what they're not recognizing is that they're in that stability leg position. That leg is getting toasted, but they're not focusing on that because they're distracted by, the gamification or the other thing that they're doing. And so I really like the way you use that word because in essence, you are distracting your brain while your body is physical.
Yeah. Does that resonate with you at all, Mandy? Some of this stuff kind of helps you get through the hard, literal, physical part of training?
Yeah, I think, I think for me at my level, everything's a bit of a competition. So even just like having someone right beside me doing Blazepods, as well, and we're like racing against each other, it just kind of brings that other level, right? You don't necessarily realize how much or how hard you're working because I'm just trying to beat that person, or I'm trying to get there before they get there. So, I mean, it's the same thing even in the boxing world. People love boxing, right? Because it's so physical and they get such a good workout, but they're not really thinking about all the elements that go in when they're actually like throwing punches, right? You're using your whole body. So it's the same kind of idea, how it's it's distracting is definitely a good way to put it.
Michael, you brought up kids for a moment. Do you see some kind of application here that children could utilize this type of technology?
Wow. I mean, I don't want to get too technical on this, but you have something that's essentially your like CEO of your brain. These are things called executive functions, and your executive functions are like inhibiting from doing something, like delaying not doing something when you really want to do it. So there's different components of this, like we talked about before, like this working memory and this sustained focus or divided attention, or the idea of like, texting and not paying attention in class and how to train that. So you can actually train all of these different cognitive abilities by using Blazepod. My kids have been using them regularly, and we make them very sports specific. My son plays soccer. We'll have him, touch a pod and then have to look over his shoulder, identify another pod, make a nice, open step turn and move into that. So he's just repeating over and over again. And, practice may not make perfect, but practice makes permanent. And through that, these lights can do so many things at all levels. You can take a small child. Mandy, yours is a daughter that's 3?
Yeah, she uses them. Right.
Footwork, handwork, put 2 on the ground and put 2 on a table, and then have them light up, and they're moving as quickly as possible. And it's learning how to use the upper body, lower body sequencing and left hand, right hand, so they don't become like, right dominant. Or you can tell them, hey, right hand red, left hand blue. And so now they're having to like utilize the cross motion, which doesn't happen until you're like, 3 or 4 years old. So there's so many like cognitive adaptations that can happen utilizing these things in a playful way, which I think is so much more fun, because my kids don't want to get out and train with me. It's too hard for them. But this is gamified. And then the one thing that Mandy said that I love is competition. They're PRing every time. They're like, what did you get? I have to beat that, which I love.
What's really amazing here is I'm a parent too. I got a 12-year-old and an 8-year-old. My 8-year-old is really into esports and games and all of that stuff. And it's funny, as parents, we sit there and we're like, less screen time, do less of this, do less of that, because that's just not what we know. And here we are talking about gamifying our physical fitness. Like, we're the ones that need to have like the actual thing happening to our brain constantly to keep us engaged. It's really crazy. Mandy, you going to make your daughter a boxer? Is that happening?
Well, I don't know. She likes the footwork, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you were asking, like my daughter, she's 2 going on 3. So for her, we just keep it super simple. And whenever I'm using them, she wants to. So I just put them in the garage and I just put them in different areas, and she'll just run to them and touch them. And she just loves it.
Yeah.
So it just keeps them busy.
Let's go with this. And Mandy, I'd just like to just kind of get your thoughts, because this is modern stuff that we're talking about in training, and you've made it to the height of your discipline by making it to the Olympics. So you've been doing this for a long time to get there. How has training in your experience changed through the years as you have modernized to become what you've become?
I mean, I think when you start out, you're learning your skills, right? You're learning the movements, you're learning everything, and then you have to just refine those skills. So you have to find creative ways to do that. So yeah, I think it changes because you're putting maybe less. You don't have to put maybe the repetitions. Like at this point for this Olympic cycle, for me, I didn't really feel like I had to put as many repetitions in. Like I had the technique down. It was more about, being creative, trying to add new elements to my game. So that's where, working with the neuro training, doing things, with Blazepods, doing stuff around reaction, and just trying to have a little bit more fun in the the gym and in competition, I think kind of became the goal for me towards as I was working towards this Olympic cycle. And then again, just being creative. Right now, it's just such a difficult time for everybody, going through this whole, transition of what's happening. Can we go to gyms? Can we not? Now we're in lockdown. Now we're not. I think if you want to be consistent with your training, you have to find ways to be able to do that anywhere. So finding tools that allow you to do that are pretty important as well.
Michael Cummings is a trainer for Blazepod, and Mandy Bujold is a professional boxer who just represented Canada in the Tokyo Olympic Games. Thank you both so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
On the next Future Sport podcast, the NFT space continues to explode.
So one of the great things about NFTs is they're incredibly democratic. The technology to write a smart contract, to create a unique piece of digital content, and then to be able to sell it on a market, anyone can do.
That's Scott Lowen, CEO of Candy Digital, who is bullish that the NFT bubble will continue to grow. That will do it for this episode. As always, the future is now. This is the Future Sport Podcast. I'm Bram Weinstein.